All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to talk with you about the goals of the Innovation Fund. And this webinar will be focusing on the proposal submission and review process. So my name is Monica Plisch, and I'm an APS staff member. I'm Director of Programs. I also serve as the Innovation Fund Director and committee chair, co-chair for the Innovation Fund. And joining me in facilitating today's session are Jim Gates, past APS President and current Innovation Fund Committee co-chair, Tremaine Bretan, who's the Innovation Fund Program Officer, Tessa Lewis, Innovation Fund Program Specialist, and Katherine Sparks-Woodall, who's a special advisor to the Innovation Fund. And just a note to everyone that the webinar is being recorded and will be posted afterwards on the Innovation Fund webpage so that you can review it at your leisure. If you do not wish to be recorded, then we advise that you please keep your video off and your microphone muted. And when it comes to asking questions, you can type those in the chat. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So we do have a few topics to cover with you today, but the goal is to use most of our time to answer your questions and provide you with the information that you need to submit proposals based on your innovative ideas. Please note that you do not have to wait until the end of the session to submit your questions, and you can feel free to type them into the chat at any point. Tessa Lewis, who's the Innovation Fund Program Specialist, will monitor the chat throughout the webinar and also inform Tremaine about questions. Tremaine will be serving as our moderator today. Thank you so much, Tremaine. So we will do our best to cover all the questions that you submit, but want to apologize in advance if we are unable to cover everything. In this case, we invite you to reach out to one of us, and we'll have more information at the end of the webinar about how you can contact Tremaine or anybody else involved with the Innovation Fund. So I'll now hand it over to Jim, who will take some time to talk about the goals and structure of the Innovation Fund. And so I will pass it over to Jim.
Monica, thank you. And welcome to all of the folks who are out there at the other end of this electron stream as we try to get you well informed on the Innovation Fund. The Innovation Fund is a relatively new development. My predecessor, David Gross, past president of the American Physical Society, had this as an idea. And the goals are basically to allow our innovative, creative membership to come forth with programmatic ideas that perhaps can go to scale and make a fundamental difference. So let me talk about the structure of the group that basically evaluates proposals. The Innovation Fund Committee oversees the IF and serves as the review panel for proposals. The members of the Innovation Fund Committee include the APS past president and Innovation Fund co-director, fund director as co-chairs, the vice president, speaker of the council, the APS chief external affairs officers, 2 members of the council appointed by the president-elect. There are non-voting members of the IF committee that consist of the IF program officer and the chief financial officer for the APS. The Innovation Fund Committee meets multiple times throughout the year to conduct proposal reviews and make recommendations to the APS board for selected projects. The IFC also monitors the progress of the award projects underway. For those committee members with us today, including the IF program management team, please unmute and introduce yourself at this time. And I'm not seeing any indication, Tessa, or,
And
okay.
that's
Okay, very good. So let's proceed. I want to share with you the goals of the fund. In 2019, the APS came out with a new strategic plan. And one of the priorities in that plan was to strategically invest in new opportunities and partnerships to benefit our members, the broader physics community, and society. A specific action that was called for related to that priority was the creation of the APS Innovation Fund. For the past 3 years, with 4 funding cycles, the IF has ignited and supported emerging ideas and opportunities that reflect the needs and desires of our community. Let me provide you with some information about how the Innovation Fund is structured. Innovation Fund proposals should advance interest in the physics community and align with the APS strategic goal plan. Let me make sure you know that the strategic plan is available online. You simply go to the American Physical Society site. There's a search box there. Type in APS Strategic Plan 2019. It's an amazing accomplishment, and I commend all of my predecessors for putting it together before I joined the executive line. So, some information. The Innovation Fund Innovation Fund proposal should advance the interests of the physics community and align with that strategic plan. Please keep in mind that submissions should not address traditional physics research problems, nor represent continuations of existing efforts. It's really new innovations that we're seeking. And I note that if you will look at the chat, there you will find the link that will take you directly to the 2019 Innovation Plan document. The maximum award amount is a total of $200,000 over a 2-year period, which is intended to provide support for a pilot program. Projects that have continuing activities after the award period ends are expected to develop a sustainability plan. And let me comment that we do have examples of some of our initial awardees who have sought and successfully gained support by outside philanthropic organizations. So you should think of this as a starter grant. If IF awards have ranged from $20,000 up to the maximum of $200,000. So there's a range of financial support available, and people putting together proposals should keep that in mind, but you don't have to design to the maximum amount, I like to tell my friends. Indirect costs are limited to a 5% for all grant expenses. The PI must be an American Physical Society member to apply. Co-PIs do not have to be members. Next, you will hear about current IF projects and the review process. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. So I wanted to just give you a brief overview of some of the current awards. So here we have a plot that shows the areas that are covered with the number of awards in each area on the x-axis. So we've got a total of 11 awards. These range from diversity and education initiatives to stuff dealing with different careers in physics, public engagement, and one in our affiliated with our government affairs office. So some of the projects that we have cover multiple areas. So for example, one of the recent awards was the Data Science Education Community of Practice project. And this project is designed to establish a community of practice to address the urgent need to integrate data science into the physics curriculum. So that project, covers education and industry and some careers. So I want to note, however, that while we're showing you some focus areas of the current awards, The Innovation Fund is not prescriptive. These are not the only areas that the Innovation Fund will award grants in. The committee doesn't want to limit the scope of your ideas to specific categories and doesn't value specific areas over others. They take each application, each proposal, and base it off of a rubric. So there's not, oh, if I apply in the diversity area, I'm more likely to get funded. That is not the case. So the next slide shows a list of our current awards, and you can find more details about these on the website. But so, for example, we've funded one project, Women Supporting Women in the Sciences, and that's about an international team designing and distributing low-cost physics and material science lab kits to elementary and secondary school students in Africa. And then we also have, for example, another African initiative, the US African Initiative in Electronic Structure. And this project is creating a platform for more collaborations between African and US physicists, and it's funded 2 workshops. The second workshop is actually going to take place this May. And then researchers from Africa will be visiting US-based research groups to pursue additional collaborations. So we have a wide range of products, and I think that Tremaine is going to tell you a little bit more about the structure of the application and review process.
Thank you, Katherine. So we want to take just a moment to pause. We've shared a little bit of information about the committee, the Innovation Fund leadership, the goals and mission, the grant funding, who is eligible. So I'd like to have you engage in the chat briefly about new information that you heard so far. And then the other piece I'd like to ask you to engage in with the chat is, what are you still hoping to hear during your time with us? This session is for you, so we want to make sure that we're providing the information that you need to understand and also submit a strong proposal. So I will pause and look at some of the things that you're putting in the chat. This will help me as I go forward and the rest of us in how we structure the information that we're sharing. And if some of the information that you're hoping to still learn is not covered in the remaining slides, we are definitely going to use that time as much as we have for the Q&A session. Great, taking a look at the chat. Thank you all for those of you that are jumping in the chat right now. Yes, David Jackson, good question, for sure. And I think it's Juliana, seeing that question as well. And Phil, yep. Great, great. So I will continue on. Tessa's going to continue looking at what you put in the chat as I go forward. And then when we get to the Q&A piece, she's definitely going to send me those questions that I don't cover in our next slides. So as you heard Katherine say, I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about our application and review process. I'd like to start out with the timeline for the application and review process. So in about a month is the deadline for initial 2-page pre-proposals. And I'm going to talk next a little bit more about what the pre-proposal is and also what we're looking for. After that piece in May, we're going to send out invitations to those who have made it to the next round to submit a full proposal. And the deadline for finalists to submit a full proposal is June 27th. So from May 16th to June 27th, you have about 6 weeks to work with your team and also craft your full proposal. In the fall, that will be after mid-September, the grant recipients will be notified, and we plan for there to be an award start date, January 1st of 2023. There is a couple of months in between when you're notified and also that award start date. So I'll also talk about what we'll do in between you being awarded and then also the actual project starting. So let's start off with the application process and the pre-proposal, which I just noted will be due March 21st. You can access the application from the Innovation Fund webpage, and we'll be sure to again share that link with you. So the PI must be an APS member. You've heard that. And that could be US-based or international applicants from any career stage are welcome to apply as long as you are an APS member. There was a question about the seniority of, who's on the team or who is the PI. And again, it needs to be a member, but also you want to think about that team and making sure that the level of expertise that you need is there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be reflected in the title, but the experience and expertise that you need to bring forth your project. So definitely must be a PI, and then a maximum of co-PIs as a part of your pre-proposal. In the end, it's going to equal about 2 pages. And you're probably thinking that's not a lot, right? To get your full idea out. And so again, this is brief, but we're asking you to be concise with some details. We want to get a sense of what is it that you hope to do? What is innovative about this? What is novel? Why is this necessary in order to advance the APS strategic plan? We need to hear that, but it also needs to be concise. We need to understand that purpose, but give us more details too is on how you plan to execute it. The expertise that you have at the table to help you execute it. And again, what are the expected outcomes? This is what we talked about as a pilot project. And so sometimes you don't know, is it going to reach the success that you hope? But we need to hear what you hope in that short pre-proposal. Each committee member will review at least each application will be reviewed by at least 3 IFC committee members, and you've seen, who makes up that leadership. Also, as a part of that process, we'll have some APS senior staff, after the IFC have reviewed the top pre-proposals, they will also do a review to assist with feedback on the feasibility, sustainability, and how your pre-proposal is advancing the strategic plan. And that feedback will be provided to the IFC as they make final decisions. When we get to the full proposal stage, again, those invitations will be made in May, and the IFC makes that decision on who will submit full proposals. And in a little bit, I'll talk about what is it that the IFC is looking for in that proposal. So with the full proposal, you're going to do about 8 pages. So this is where you can expand on the details of what has brought you to this idea, why it's necessary, and really providing the details on how you're going to execute it, what resources you're going to need, and understanding if there are going to be resources needed from your institution or from APS. How are you going to utilize the expertise among the group of the PI and the co-PIs? All of those things we want to see. And also we want to understand the timeline and that you thought about efficiently how you can execute all of these details. Also with the full proposal piece, so you get invitations to submit a full proposal. You have 6 weeks to craft that proposal. And during that time, we will share those pre-proposals with unit and committee representatives within APS that are relevant to your proposal and have that subject matter background there, and also APS staff. And you'll be able to collaborate with the members of the unit committees and also APS staff to think about how should you best structure your full proposal so it shows that you're maximizing strategy and also efficiency, and thinking about how to utilize resources, or maybe thinking about if there are resources you hadn't thought about within your institution among the PI and also the co-PIs. As a part of the full proposal process, the committee may also ask more questions. So they may see everything in there, but there may be just a piece missing about, well, how are you specifically going to execute this? Or do you already have a relationship with this institution in which you say you're going to be able to, host a webinar? So those may be questions that come about during that process. So let's talk about a strong proposal and what does the committee see as a strong proposal? And this is relative to the pre-proposal and also the full proposal as well. These 6 things are very important for what you should provide, even within 2 pages. And I know you're probably thinking, how do I share all of that in 2 pages? And it's possible. And we're also here to answer those questions, right? So it's important that you highlight how your proposal is relevant to the strategic plan, innovative, the impact and how you're going to measure it, sustainable, if applicable, and also feasible. And when we think about sustainable, there may be some projects that can definitely, and we all know, can make the impact that you need and get those measurable outcomes in 2 years. But for some of you, this is going to be a seed grant to propel your novel idea further. And so then we need to hear, so have you thought about, once the Innovation Fund ends, how you're going to continue and execute this plan? Are you seeking other grants? Do you maybe have a commitment later on that will help you depending upon how your project progresses? Are there people within your institution that are willing to help you continue on as well? With the relevancy of the APS Strategic Plan, I think it's important that if you haven't looked at it, take a look and, highlight areas and how you're going to help and how this proposal is going to help advance that plan, but also promote physics to the broader community and that relevancy and the impact. Who's being impacted, what population or populations, and being very clear on how you're going to know if you're meeting the goals that you've said that you're going to do in your proposal. So I'd like to share now a couple examples. Actually, let me go, I want to go back because I have one example. Of course, there are others, but I wanted to share one example of a current project who did a good job at meeting these requirements in their proposal. And it's the Modern Physics in the Latin American Classroom project. And let me just share a couple of things to show you how they address the problem, offer the solution, and how APS resources would or would not be used. So the PI noted in their proposal, there's a huge disparity between public and private schools in Latin America. Private schools are able to teach physics at the level of physics in the US, but public schools are way behind. Students in the world are interested in modern physics, but they don't have the resource to learn and understand it. So this PI did a good job of, here is what I see as a problem, and let me offer you the solution. Is that I will create 15 to 20 volumes in all different areas of physics, from quantum mechanics to climate change, and they will be translated into Portuguese to teach high school teachers to use in their classrooms, and also in Spanish. So again, a solution. The other piece with this proposal is that the PI said these materials are attractive because they're easy to teach online, and they're attractive to the teachers because they get the attention of the students. So again, highlighting the impact, but also the feasibility of this is actually something that can be done, and indicating that beyond this, if I get this done here, the sustainable piece, this is a pilot project for 2 years. It may continue, but again, it was indicating what was needed in that proposal. I'd like to share 2 more examples of current projects that we have and how they did a good job at meeting definitely all of the requirements that we're looking for, but did a great job at one specific area. So the Physics Coalition for Nuclear Threat Reduction did a great job at highlighting or actually working to make this project sustainable. Looking at the concerns that they have for nuclear threat reduction, they knew this is not a 2-year project, but we do need the Innovation Fund for that, to get us off the ground, for that seed funding. They wanted to raise the level of knowledge and awareness of U.S. physics of the U.S. physics community on issues related to nuclear threat reduction through informative presentations and discussions at about 66 physics institutions and at selected conferences, through print and also media outlets. And they've established a coalition of physicists that are distributed throughout the globe and key stakeholders. They've also partnered with the Carnegie Foundation to continue this project. The APS EDI Fellows Program, which is one of our newer projects, they did a great job, excellent job at the relevancy piece. So addressing equity, diversity, and inclusion in physics is a prominent goal of the APS Strategic Plan. One of the primary ways to foster inclusion and increase the retention of individuals with identities underrepresented in physics is to discuss EDI in the physics classroom. EDI Fellows seeks to address the gap between EDI resources and physicists' lack of expertise in critical conversations. So they are pairing their fellows with critical conversation specialists to present interactive workshops that address fear and build capacity for physicists to engage in EDI conversations within the physics classroom context. So now the good piece, right, the end piece is the award. And once you are awarded, and I'll even go back a little bit and remind you of something that Jim mentioned, is that the IFC makes recommendations to the APS board on who should be awarded. And then once that happens, I, as the program officer, will work with the PIs and also APS senior management to resolve any scope or budgetary concerns on those proposals. And once we get to that point where you are a grant recipient, we will work together on a memorandum of understanding. And that's also with the organization, with the PI. And in that memorandum of understanding, we are again defining and agreeing on the budget and what APS resources will be utilized. But we're also defining how you and your team are going to execute the project. We'll also, during that time, so this is that time frame of fall before January 1 of the next year, discuss the project plan and discuss if there are any APS resources that you need to execute your project. We will discuss those. We will talk about a timeline. We'll develop a statement of work. So that is some of the involvement that I will have with you if you are awarded. Right, that concludes our formal presentation. We wanted to spend most of the time answering your questions, but to share, some of the foundation of the Innovation Fund. So we hope that's been helpful. And now I'm going to pause and check in with Tessa via the chat to see what questions we have. But you are also able to unmute, and you can actually raise your hand via Zoom if you don't need to or want to put your question in the chat, and you can ask your question. That was one of the reasons that we wanted to have this more as a Zoom meeting, so that we can have that interaction and make sure we're addressing your question to help you understand the Innovation Fund and the best way of submitting your proposal.
So Tremaine, you can go ahead and check our Slack messages. I've compiled them there as well.
Thanks, Tessa. All right, so we've got a number of questions to answer. And again, I will go to the messages that Tessa sent me. You can continue adding questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will hopefully be able to see you and call on you. At this moment, I think it's going to be easier for me to stop sharing my screen, but I will reshare before the official end of the webinar so that you will be reminded of the deadline and also have our email address. If you have any questions beyond the webinar, you can email us at aps.org. We've got a little under 30 minutes to answer questions. Tessa and I will stay around after 3 p.m. if anybody would like to stay on and further discuss. I see Joseph with a hand up. Joseph, would you like to unmute to ask your question? And then I will go to the chat, of course, to get some of those questions.
Sure. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I'm just curious if anybody here on the call is a member of FIOP, and I put into the chat my interest in something with entrepreneurship and startups in the physics sector. Is there anybody else in FIOP or academics or others? Does this seem like a reasonable idea? Is there broad support for this? Do you get students and others, postdocs, other people, I got to start a new company in laser physics or sensors or whatever the case may be. But I don't know what to do as far as the business aspect of it. I know the science, I just don't know the business aspect of it. That's what I wanted to kind of bring together, those two communities. Any thoughts?
I'm checking the chat because it looks like there's a question there. And then I think, Crystal, are you unmuting to answer?
Tremaine, thanks. I can actually sort of speak to that. I just wanted to, that's something that I'm actually really interested in. Crystal Bailey, head of career programs. I was on a grant funded by the NSF a few years ago on innovation and entrepreneurship education in physics. So I'd be happy to talk more with you about what we did and explore that idea with you a little bit further because it's something I am very passionate about. So.
Okay, I will follow up with when the slides are available. I'll share it with my colleagues, and we'll follow up with you maybe for some a smaller Zoom session to flesh out the ideas. And I know the deadline. By the way, I plan to be in Chicago in a couple weeks, but I know that I want to get any pre-proposal in before the Chicago meeting if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a hand from Jake.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask, I saw one of these questions in the chat, but can an individual submit a proposal as a PI, but then, for example, also be listed as a collaborator on a separate proposal?
Great question, Jake. Katherine, would you like to talk about that?
Yep, that's allowed.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was going to bring up that you didn't talk about is I looked at the application and there's a 2-page bio sketch, and I wonder if you could just say a few words about what should be included there.
Absolutely.
So I think that we're thinking along the lines of an NSF style kind of bio sketch where you've got, some of the education, and then there's some of the, if you have any relevant publications, and then can't remember what the activities header is in that bio sketch, but that's where I would reference that.
Thank you.
Hand up from Nancy.
I have to unmute. Thanks. Very interesting ideas here. My question is there somebody that you could talk to discuss the idea before one submits a proposal to make sure it meets the criteria and the guidelines that you have?
Yes, absolutely. And I say that we wouldn't be able to, we help you craft the best proposal because we want to be fair and equitable, but we could definitely put you potentially in contact if it would help with an APS staff member that could be a subject matter expert as well, or just, further sharing and explaining the criteria and what makes a strong proposal and things that the IFC wants to see. So,
exactly. So I would just like to discuss with somebody the idea, and they could say, oh no, that's not something that we're really interested in, and we could fine tune the project that way. Yeah. Okay.
Now,
I'd be interested in it.
Yeah, I will say the committee, the Innovation Fund Committee, They make those decisions. And so you might think that no one's interested, but it's really that committee, you know, with experience and expertise that would see that. And so I'd hate for you to, you know, I wouldn't be able to look at it or you know, other people on our team and say, oh, no, we're not interested in that. But we would be able to then funnel that to, well, let's look at our criteria. And if, you know, it's looking at the criteria is what the IFC is considering there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like our idea fits, but you know, it's good to talk to somebody before you put in the hours of work. That's
Absolutely. So you, you can send an email to if@aps.org. Tessa and I have access to that. And if we need to funnel a question out to someone else in the organization, we'll do that. But it's checked every day.
So should I address it to you then, or just to
anyone? You don't have to. Yeah,
okay.
You don't have to. You can, but you don't have to.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see there was a question in the chat that came in that Tessa sent to me was, how many awards do you expect to make for this year's competition? Monica or Katherine, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So each year the Innovation Fund Committee considers making up a total of up to 5 awards. I'll just say in previous award cycles, I don't think 5 awards have ever been made. It's been typically from 2 to 4, but the maximum would be 5.
I'm not sure if this question has been answered in the chat, but good question. We've received this question a lot. Does the project have to take place in the US, or can the project be funded if it includes groups in and out of the US? So the answer.
That was for me.
Yes, and we have projects currently that way that are partly taking place. Well, the goal was to partly take place in Africa, but that was last year, and so it had to be virtual, and then the other piece to take place here in the United States. Next question, because we did, well, let me go, let's see, I'm not sure if this one is in the chat here, but we've gotten this question a lot, was, does the PI need affiliation with an institute? So again, the eligibility is that you are an APS member. And Katherine, do you want to say?
Yeah, so typically we do write memorandums of understanding with universities or nonprofit groups or whatever organization is getting the funds. If an individual person was gonna get an award, we'd have to go and talk to our finance department to get a little more information about that. But we do typically prefer to go through, University of Maryland or other organizations who are used to handling these amounts of funds.
Next question, what is the expected seniority of the PI? What about others on the team? For example, will a grant with a postdoc listed as a PI be considered equally? And I'll turn this one over to Katherine.
Sure. Yeah. So definitely a grant with a PI as a postdoc can be considered. We have one of our current awards right now has a postdoc as a PI. So I'll kind of echo what Tremaine said. It's not about the seniority of the PI, but it's about making sure that you have the right people involved to achieve your goals. So having the ability to carry out the work that you're proposing is important.
All right, hand up from Barry. Barry, would you like to unmute and ask your question? All right.
Just unmuting, finding the buttons. Yes, I'm calling from South Africa. I just wondered if in your strategic plan or in one of the documents, you've got a working definition of innovation. So I'm just wondering, what is innovation as this program sees it? Could you maybe point me to something about that?
Great question, Barry. Monica?
Yeah, so Barry, as it's been discussed in the Innovation Fund Committee, innovation, it doesn't have to be what one would say is that nobody has, doesn't have to be the case that nobody's ever done it before. It could also be a business innovation, for example, bringing a new activity to the APS community, for example. And I think, if that doesn't help clear it up, we can talk one-on-one and take that offline. But I think the definition of innovation is a little bit more flexible, and that business innovation, is also welcome.
Thank you.
Another question. How does, oh, nope, that's not the one. We have an innovative activity that has started already. It would expand with this funding, but the focus would be on assessment and dissemination of this idea to the community. Is that new enough? Monica, Jim, or Katherine, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, I can take that, Tremaine. Okay. So the Innovation Fund is intended to fund new projects. It serves as a way to pilot new innovative activities. And so at least based on the information that was shared, it sounds like that would not be a new project. Now I know that there's also been, and therefore likely not eligible, but we can talk about the particulars because sometimes one or two sentences is not enough to convey all the information that's relevant. I'll say in addition to that, there was a similar question I think I saw that was about asking about, can you fund a project that it's kind of like a component of another project? And I guess what I would ask in return is that component able to stand on its own and therefore could be defined as a standalone project? I mean, oftentimes with projects, it can be useful to have some connection or relevance to other activities that are happening, but it should really be able to stand on its own as its own initiative, if that helps at all. And again, we're happy to have conversations offline if you still have questions about it.
I see Christian with the hand up, and I am, after Christian, going to go to the chat because I saw some other questions that I'm sure other people may be thinking about. Christian, would you like to unmute?
Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe I actually put this in the chat very briefly, but I want to explain a little bit more. I'm a physicist, but I have half of my connections to the music community, and my child is crying here in a second. So I'm quite connected with the music community, and I can think of several projects that would engage the musicians into creating something or doing performances or recording something that would connect, that would really engage science and physics in a different way, in an educational way. I just don't know exactly what kind of, because I believe, I can't remember the verbiage, but there's something about, innovative projects that would engage the community in physics or something like that. And I just don't know exactly what additional factors I need to include. I mean, what factors would make it eligible? You see what I mean? Does it have to involve, I don't know, a series of concerts involving underprivileged communities, or does it have to produce material that would be used for education in the classroom? Because I can think of, a very broad kind of like very physics-inspired music collaboration by a bunch of well-known musicians, but I don't know exactly how to ensure the kind of impact that you're looking for in this innovation factor, or if this would be at all interesting for you, for the fund. Sorry if it's not so well defined, but it was kind of improvising while managing to get here.
Like, it looked like Monica was going to answer.
Yes, yes, I'm happy to respond to that, Christian. It sounds like, first of all, I'll say is that projects that are in the area of public engagement are certainly very welcome. We know that's an important thing to many APS members. What I would encourage you to think about, Christian, or anybody else who's thinking about projects maybe along these lines, would be to think about go back to the selection criteria. I think, and that really kind of defines what makes a strong proposal. So Tremaine went over those earlier, but I think in terms of sustainability, if you were to it's one thing to have a performance, for example. It's another thing to have materials that may allow others to organize something similar, and that perhaps could be an argument for sustainability. It also relates to impact, and so the greater the impact, I think, could also be dependent on whether there's a pathway for and a rationale that others may do something similar. So again, Christian, I would just kind of refer you back to those elements for a strong proposal. And again, we're happy to have further conversation offline if that would be helpful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so essentially I need to make sure that the elements of the project, have this impact and other aspects of strong proposal, regardless of, but the public engagement in general is interesting. Okay, great, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
And I put that back up. Hopefully you can see what makes a strong proposal, what we're saying would make a strong proposal. So I wanted to go back to a question I saw in the chat. I think two questions. There was a question regarding can stipends be included in that budget proposal? And to my understanding, that is yes. There was also a question regarding the level of accounting that someone would need as they're crafting their proposal or keeping up with their proposal. And I would, recommend that, utilizing where you are, your institution, whatever that may be, a university or nonprofit, any resources that you have there and helping you craft that budget. But as far as, once that budget is crafted, myself, I'm keeping an eye out on the budget. We'll also have check-ins regarding your spending or if you're forecasting any changes. But I definitely would encourage you to communicate with your colleagues or people at your institution, your research office or grants that may be able to assist with crafting that budget. But you're welcome to reach out to us if you have questions. Katherine, did you want to add something else there?
Yeah, just one thing about thinking about the pre-proposal budget. It's not a full detailed budget. The full proposal will request a detailed line by line budget with a justification. The pre-proposal budget is basically it's a form where you say, like, here's what I want to do, here's how much I think it's going to cost. And the idea in the pre-proposal is give us some sense of what the financial needs are, and do you have a good sense of what would be needed to accomplish your project? So if, for example, your project was to create a lot of workshops, but you had no money for food if they were in person, that would be like, well, maybe this person is not thinking through the scope of what's going on. So just kind of that's what the pre-proposal budget is for. It's just a basic outline, not extremely detailed.
There's a question for non-funded projects. Is there an APS mechanism to facilitate partnering with other projects? Katherine or Monica?
Yeah. Well, so what I can say, it may be helpful to talk about the particulars, but in general, collaborations are certainly welcome and can help to, strengthen a project if there are partners, in-kind resources, that sort of thing that could be committed to support either the success of the initial pilot or commitments for sustainability beyond the 2-year pilot timeframe.
Yes, Joseph.
Is the minimum ask $20,000?
Good question.
I mean, could we request 15,000?
I don't think there's any lower limit necessarily, although there's not a hard lower limit, but if it's only a few $1,000s, it may not be really at the scope and scale of what the Innovation Fund is looking for. But
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And then on the collaboration, if there's another organization, let's say Optical Society of America, Materials Research Society, or some other organization like that, and there would be tangible and intangible support from that organization, either cost sharing or matching, does that help or hurt this APS program?
Good, Monica.
Yeah, so I think, Joseph, what I indicated earlier also is that I think partners can generally strengthen a proposal, especially if it helps you better achieve the criteria that were laid out for strong proposals. And any of those, impact, sustainability, feasibility. So I think the thing to keep in mind is, do you have, the commitments from those potential partners? Can you make a convincing argument in the proposal that you have a way to operate the project? With more partners, of course, there's a little more work to make sure that you have effective relationships there, collaborations, commitments, all that sort of thing lined up. So I think you just want to be careful to document that.
One follow-up on that, as far as scaling, if the minimum threshold is $20,000, I'm assuming that would involve maybe 3-4 people for the 2-year period. Is that the type of scale that I'm looking at? Or if I've got somebody else helping as an assistant and so forth, but you need one PI and maybe 2 or 3 other people who are going to be really involved. Is that the type of scale you're looking at? And not a team of 20 people, but a handful of people for a $20,000 project. Am I thinking correctly?
I think when you look at a number of the projects that have been funded, you can see what is the size and scope of the project management team for those proposals. You can also look at what is the scope and scale of the members of the community that are affected by that, and those may be very different numbers, if you follow what I'm saying. So yeah.
We've got about 4 minutes left. I know, unfortunately, we won't be able to get to everyone's questions, but definitely trying, and Tessa and I will hang around for a bit. Is Amy Young still on the call? And if so, would you like to share anything? Amy is involved.
Hi, Tremaine.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I just wanted to just sit in on the call. So I would, I'm helping with the US Africa initiative, which is an Innovation Fund award. So in terms of some of the questions people had asked, the seniority of the PI and the co-PI, so our PI and co-PI, and we also have a partner in Africa, Omalolu Akin Ojo, who is the head of the East African Institute for fundamental research. And we have Renata Winskovich, who's at Columbia, and Sinead, who is at one of the national labs, and Richard Martin, who is emeritus from U of I, and then also who is at Stanford emeritus now. So our initiative, some of the questions were, where does the activity take place and what happened? So obviously when COVID came, the idea to have an in-person workshop really was shaken up. And so we had a mini kickoff instead at the APS March meeting, and that was really great. We had a lot of posters and a lot of activity. And then we had another one this past June, which continued that. And it's great because we're learning about more collaborations that we didn't know about. And so they're finding some support in other partners. So that's been really exciting to see that. And I'm responsible for the website. So I'm revising it right now. I was talking to Richard last night. So it's not as kind of comprehensive as I'd like it to look like. But, you know, when we first started, it was a new initiative. So there was kind of not much to talk about yet. But now there's been a lot of activities. Yeah. So it's we're looking forward to the May workshop, where we're having researchers from Africa come, and Sinead has been responsible for looking over she's really familiar with the backgrounds of a lot of the participants because she and Richard both taught workshops, electronic structure workshops in Africa for about 10 years now. So they're already really familiar with a lot of the people and kind of the research groups there. We had, I think, 30 universities at our June workshop, and about 12 countries in Africa participate. So it was pretty widespread. Yeah, it was very exciting to see that.
Thank you for sharing, Amy. We appreciate that.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in, I'd like to just emphasize that, you know, an APS member located anywhere in the world is welcome to submit a proposal. There are no geographic restrictions on that.
Thank you. We have just under 1 minute left. There was one question I did want to address before we officially end. Since the funding is over 2 years, is there an assessment after 1 year to determine if one goes into year 2? Yes, there is. And so you receive awarded funding over 2 years, but we do, you know, quarterly check-ins with you. We'll ask you to submit a progress report, see how spending goes, and IFC, the Innovation Fund Committee, meets to review that progress going forward, and we'll meet and talk of, you know, any adjustments and things of that nature. Well, we are right at 3 p.m. and I know everyone's time is valuable. I'm so glad to see you all, and thank you all for joining us. Tessa and I will hang around if you'd like to stay on and discuss any additional questions. We also will send all of the slides to everyone that registered, and a link to view the recording. That information will also be available on our website, and also a great FAQ document as well that will address some of the questions again that were answered here. Before we officially end, Monica, would you like to share anything, or Jim?
I mean, I can just say, I really, again, thank everybody for attending, and we look forward to receiving your exciting proposal.
Awesome.
And I'd like to just thank everyone and urge you, if you have those exciting ideas, this is what will drive the APS in the future in a way that we serve our community best. So please, please submit them, submit proposals, bright ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have additional questions, please do not hesitate to send us an email about anything, especially before the March 21st deadline. Thank you, and have a good rest of the week.
Bob Terry here. I have a question.
Yes.
Monica, I was curious. I came in late. I had some conflicts that didn't iron out. I'd like to get a general idea from you as to how much normal, innovative, original physics research is contemplated in these proposals, and how much public interaction. I mean, if I have something which is got normal, innovative, original physics going on, and I wish to involve the public, is that as strong as something which is dominantly a public interaction with well-known physics? Is there a break point in your thinking as to where you come to a proposer and say, that's too physicsy, you should just get normal research money for that? How do you adjudicate, how do you balance that mix in your mind?
I mean, so let me be clear on this, Robert. The Innovation Fund does not fund traditional physics research. And so for that, we would refer you to any of the other, funding agencies or sources. And so I think what the Innovation Fund is seeking to support is, activities that are innovative for the APS community. That are innovative to support and extend and expand what APS is looking to do, going into the future. And so I would imagine that, probably it would be good to talk offline a little bit more about your idea, if that would be useful. But the Innovation Fund does not support traditional physics research.
So by your words, traditional physics research, you mean something which is basically original physics, original science. I basically want to use established science to do things for a community. Is that the thrust of what's going on here?
Let's see. It sounds like we should talk about your idea.
Well, I have three ideas and they all have a different mix on this issue. So I'm just trying to.
Yeah, because, I mean, for example, public engagement is certainly something that, would be considered. In other words, how do you foster public appreciation for physics, deepen understanding of, say, the nature of science and the scientific method, supporting the public to learn about physics, about opportunities in physics. So that would be, we certainly have received and reviewed a number of proposals along those lines.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's exactly the direction that you were considering.
Well, in part. Okay, here's one idea which has come to me. I worked with Civil Air Patrol, and I've long been interested in planetary defense. And there is a particular new form of telescope out there which can do asteroid occultations in front of a star to track asteroids. And I'd like to get proposal money through something like this to form a group of Civil Air Patrol enthusiasts across the nation who would have these telescopes. And so we could learn and get into the process of doing these occultations. So there is, when you take the data, you get a light curve, you send it off to the company. I would do something like maybe ask the company, hey, can we do original thinking or similar thinking, so there's an alternative place to send the data. So that if there's an ambiguity, then we get a little more openness about whether or not somebody considers a data trace to be a valid occultation or not. That's very applied. But that might engender something in the way of treating the data, like with data processing, which was original and falls under the scope of original research in computational physics, because people have ideas. And we might want to put those ideas in the follow-on proposals or whatever I have. So that's how I see the split going on. I see this very much formal to involve a community in known physics and in things which can be very relevant. That's one. So how would that strike you as something worth doing?
Right. Okay. So, so you bring up a really interesting idea, which is, if I'm understanding right, it sounds like it's an idea that's in the category of maybe citizen science.
It very much is citizen science, and that's what the company calls it. So I'm essentially taking that citizen science concept and trying to get APS support for it, because I know a lot of physicists in the planetary defense community who aren't necessarily convinced that this is all that useful. But if I'm doing it and I'm asking them for feedback and we write papers about it Is that going to be outside the scope of any proposal work here? Or would it, because it would be advancing the science, but also would be advancing the understanding and the basis for this community outreach?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say, based on what I think I've understood and heard from you, Robert, would be to say, I think if it's, if the primary focus of it is around public engagement, citizen science, raising awareness about these issues, that sort of thing, and the fact that, some research is also happening alongside, I mean, certainly don't want to penalize that, just would want I think the primary focus of the proposal to be around, to really emphasize the public engagement aspect, the aspect of engaging, citizens. I think that would be, if that's the primary focus, then I would suspect, ultimately the Innovation Fund Committee will make these decisions, but if that's the primary focus, and the idea of actually accomplishing research is maybe a second focus or equal, or then I think it would be eligible.
Well, I've got to say that if you want to attract people into physics and you don't give them the thrill and the responsibility of doing some original research at some level, at some extent, you're failing, because that's what sucks us in.
Yep.
Original research is what sucks all of us in.
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say citizen science, I think, does meet the eligibility criteria. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, that's one I'll work toward, and I have a couple others which are maybe a little dicier and more ambitious. So, do I have your email? Will I get your email in the material that you'll send out to the links? Or
I think if somebody could put the Innovation Fund email, and then we all can have access to that. So
okay.
And if you can put that in the link, okay, to if@aps.org. So
I think I can manage if@aps.org. All right. Thank you so much for your time. And I can get a video transcript of the entire affair, right? On the link.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, ladies. I appreciate it. Thanks for accommodating my late entry.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions we could address?
Thank you so much. This has been great. I get the impression that this is a very competitive grant. Do you know of other grants that might share some overlap in scope with this grant that we might concurrently apply to? Or is this very unique?
A little bit unique. I do know that there's the like the National Science Foundation has the it's the ASIL program. So it's the, what is it, Advancing Informal Science Learning initiative. And so that's particularly relevant if you want to do, public engagement, which is also informal science learning. There may be other, that's one dimension of what's acceptable, for the Innovation Fund. I know that there are foundations that do care about these kinds of things. And so, for example, like the Sloan Foundation or the Heising-Simons Foundation, I know both of them have actually made awards to APS related to diversity projects. And so those would be, a couple of foundations to approach if you had a similar type of idea. And in fact, I think Sloan just put out a call for proposals, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check my email here. Let's see, it's not coming up immediately, but around advancing equity, diversity, inclusion, and STEM. So they typically are focused in that area. So those are a couple ideas. And of course, for education, a lot of foundations will support that as well.
Question on the typical number of proposals. Thank you. I saw the number that are granted, the total number you have about a dozen at this time. I'm just curious of the number that you typically receive and what is the ratio? And again, I know it's competitive and you can't fund everything, but like for a typical NSF review panel, 15, 20 proposals, you get a half a dozen that are must fund or fund if possible. And then, there's another half a dozen that are, well, these are pretty good. Let's see if there's any money left over. Then there's some that are just don't even consider. I'm just curious, what's your experience in the past, just in very general terms of the number received and the number that make it through to the final cut? Thank you.
Katherine or Tessa, did you want to provide past numbers?
Katherine, you want me to do it? Okay. Yeah, so I believe it's about 100 people usually apply each year. And then can you ask the second part of the question, sir?
You get 100 pre-proposals, and then how many actual proposals?
So we typically, I think, fund, or we typically invite anywhere between 10 to 20 proposals to submit full proposals. In the past 2 years, we've had an average of about 65 preliminary proposals, excluding the first year of funding when we had a lot more. So it's not horrible odds.
Understand that making the first gatekeeper is probably critical. So just curious on the odds on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, one thing I can also add to that is we have a two-stage proposal process. And so, you should have a well-developed concept, but the initial proposal is about two pages. And so we do that on purpose so it doesn't require a lot of writing to throw your hat in the ring, so to speak. And you can get feedback right away as to whether your idea is going to be a top idea. It's selected to go forward to write a full proposal. We find the two-stage process works fairly well in terms of saving people time, allowing the reviewers to go through a lot of ideas at a high level. But, again, I would encourage you as much as you can develop your concept, and have it be concrete, specific, well-developed, addressing all those criteria to have a strong proposal. I think that will help you make it past that first gate. Oh, and then I'll just say, in terms of the number of proposals that are invited to write teams that are invited to write a full proposal, that's about a dozen or so typically.
Are there any other questions we can answer? I will take the silence as a good thing, and that we've done the best that we can to address all the information. All right. Well, again, thank you all for being here. If you have questions, you can email us at if@aps.org. Our web page also has a lot of great information, and reaching out to us to email if you need to have another quick virtual conversation. We can always try and accommodate that as well, if that will be helpful. So this is definitely not the end of you being able to ask questions and get additional information. So thank you for coming, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can provide additional information. Thank you again for joining. We look forward to seeing your proposals.
Thank you.